we're not trying to sell it here, and it's not people that want giant houses. So, hope so. Oh. Okay, let me get my. This is it. I think this is everybody that's coming. Yeah, we're good. Your mic on? Lights should be off, the red lights.
How's this?
There you go.
All right. Okay, I call the March 6, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. City Planner Houston, roll call, please.
Nicole Matson.
Here.
Steve Moore. Brent Beam.
Here.
Amber Gustafson. Jana Casper. Steve Lindos. Paul Krabenhoff.
Okay, is there a motion to amend and approve the March agenda?
Chair Beam, I just wanted to note, like to recommend that you wait for item 6A until you have a full commission, so that you have more
Okay,
for your election of officers.
Okay.
So that would be the amendment. You could motion to approve an amended agenda without that item.
Okay,
I move that we remove item 6A from the agenda.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, is there a motion to amend and approve the March agenda without item 6A?
Didn't, but you guys, your microphones are on.
Test. Turn the button off. Now?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. How about yours? Yeah? Mine's on. Okay, thank you. So I'm seconding your motion to approve without.
You would want to move to approve the amended agenda.
I will move to approve the amended agenda to remove 6A.
We already
Or all
moved
of
6A,
Oh.
and now we're approving the whole rest of the agenda.
The rest of it, yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll second.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Yes.
All right. Yes. Okay. Is there a motion to amend or approve the December 5th, 2022 minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the December 5th minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Are there any citizens to be heard on items not on the agenda? Okay. We'll move on to public hearings. A request of Classic Touch Lounge LLC for a conditional use permit to operate a 4,220 square foot nightclub adjacent to a residential use at 1500 11th Street North. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. City Planner Houston, please provide the commission an overview of the item.
Chair Beam and Commissioners, I just wanted to note that the city attorney, I'm sorry, Kat, I'm McNamara, is that right? She just changed her name, apologize. But she is on WebEx in case we have some legal questions for the next two items. So I just wanted to make you aware that she is signed in and listening to the meeting. The request is for a conditional use permit to operate a nightclub at 1500 11th Street North, which is directly adjacent to residential uses to the east and south. The applicants signed a lease and were issued a 2 a.m. liquor license before zoning, building, fire, and environmental health reviews could be completed and approved. The CUP and the fire marshal items are still pending. During the first 2 weekends of operation, the nightclub had 3 noise complaints, a complaint about nightclub patrons parking at the Holiday Station across the street, and there was 1 accident in the parking lot where there was a suspected DWI. We've not had any calls for service for the 3rd and 4th weekends of operation. 1 comment was received from Moorhead Estates resident to the east, who stated he was concerned about noise and theft. He stated he believes if noise complaints continue, the nightclub should be closed. Based on the location adjacent to residential uses and on the CUP criteria, the following conditions were developed to address the general welfare, health, and safety of the neighborhood. So staff is recommending approval of the permit with the 11 conditions listed, and you'll see the 11 conditions are directly related to trying to protect the residential uses from the commercial use in that location. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any commission questions or comments?
Yes, I have many, and I'm really distressed that I don't have paper so that I could write them down. I'm okay, thank you. It'll all come back eventually, but my first question is, whose responsibility was it to check the zoning before the lease was signed? Was that the landlord? Was it the leaseholder? Who dropped the ball here?
Well, I will say probably a few people. I mean, if you're renting out a space to a tenant, you probably should look into that first before you actually rent it out. So that's one issue. And then the other issue is the leasees didn't think that they thought once they got their liquor license that that's the only approvals that they needed. And there was a misstep there, because normally when the city gets a liquor license application, applicants have to submit a business plan, and then those documents are forwarded to me, and then I double check for zoning, and then if it does still need zoning review or building, fire, environmental services, that's something that I would coordinate. I was not made aware of this liquor license until after it was approved, so that step was missed, and somewhat it was a miscommunication because Brothers Table already had a liquor license, but they didn't have this kind of liquor license. They had a liquor license, essentially, I think it was a 1 a.m. license to serve alcohol at their catering events for their business. They have since relinquished their liquor license because you can't have 2 licenses at the same location. But I think there was a miscommunication when that second license was issued, because they thought it was just the same. That's why it didn't get forwarded to me. But a nightclub is completely different use intensity than a catering liquor license. So there were a couple steps missed. On the city side, we've made some adjustments to how those are processed, and yeah, they all need to come to me. Even if it's the same, if it's a bar, everything needs to come to zoning to get those reviewed, because it wouldn't be such a issue if you didn't have residential right next door. So that's what the whole purpose of zoning is, to try to protect those existing uses.
Okay, next question. So the nightclub hours of operation shall be limited to 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday, midnight Sunday through Thursday. How are those times arrived at?
Those times were arrived at through the research that we did on the site, because it has been historically a bar or a tavern dating back to the 1930s. But we have never issued a 2 a.m. license at that location, and we just feel a 2 a.m. license is too intense when it's adjacent to a residential neighborhood. So if the CUP was approved, that 2 a.m. license would be revoked, and they would just have a regular 1 a.m. license.
Okay, and I'm sorry, does it say, 5 years? It's been about 5 years since Jerry's Bar was at that location, so not an extensive amount of time. I mean, there were people there, probably a lot of the same people living in that neighborhood when there was a bar open until 1 a.m. Do we have any sense of what the difference is between a bar and a nightclub in terms of late night noise?
Typically, because nightclubs have entertainment, they have music, they have dancing, that's their business model. It's a lot louder. What I was told about Jerry's bar location, that was kind of like a neighborhood bar. Yeah, maybe they would have music events sometimes, but it was more of like a place to stop on your way home from work. Not a lot of noise issues. We don't have, any research that we could go back and look at police reports from the day, but nightclubs also, because of the volume of customers that they have an occupancy of 300 people, because that is a pretty large space. They also tend to have loitering problems in the parking lot. I mean, people get into fights. It's noise when you're right next to residential. So that's another concern that we have, that they make sure their security staff are kind of getting people in their cars, gotta leave, can't be, hanging out at the location, causing issues with the neighbors.
Okay, and then my last question might be for the attorney, but if we approve this and they continue to have noise problems, what is our recourse?
So we did get a legal opinion from John Shockley. I'm sure Kat was CC'd on that. We are going to put language in the council resolution how that is addressed. So if they have some conditions that they have to meet by certain deadlines. If they don't meet those, the city then notifies the applicant, hey, you're not meeting your conditions of approval, and we give them a certain amount of time. The council will have a public hearing, and it's basically a revocation public hearing to discuss. Now, they might be able to work something out at that revocation, where they would put additional conditions, or they might give them more time to put up the fence, something like that. But there is another public hearing process to go through to revoke the conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all, but I reserve the right to come back if I remember another one.
I had a question about parking spaces and how that's determined. For a 300 occupancy, there was only 46 parking spots?
Yeah, so our parking in our zoning code is calculated by square footage. So essentially, I took the 4,200 square feet, and you take out square footage for like the bar, the bathrooms, the closets, storage, any other, like they have an office. So I took out a few square feet for those items, and then it's one space per 75 square feet, I believe, and that's how I came up with the 46. And didn't attribute any parking to the Brothers Table, which was, I know it's under 2,000 square feet. So because they're going to have different hours of operation, so no additional parking requirement for that. So 46 is the estimation based on their floor plan.
Thank you.
So Brothers Table and this new establishment are operating in the same building at the same time?
Yeah. At the same time, Brothers Table is no longer like serving like walk-in customers. They are, I think they're like more of a catering operation where they're servicing different customers in the city. So they're in the daytime cooking, and then they make deliveries, and then they're done for the day. So it's not going to be, whereas the bar probably doesn't open until later in the evening. Brothers Table will be gone by the time the nightclub would open.
So there's no overlap necessarily of patrons or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No.
And then it's just following up on this, what if they don't sort of adhere to any conditions that are set forth? It seems to me there's two different types of conditions. There's the conditions of the building itself and sort of the requirements we place on the building, but then there's also, as you had mentioned, the noise complaints and things like that. Will those be treated similarly by council, or?
I would say, if they're going to have continued the noise complaints, that's a discussion with the city manager. And if, obviously if it's egregious, it's probably going to be an easy call. But
Sure.
We think right now, noise might not be such an issue because it's winter. People generally get in their cars really fast because it's cold. But we do see a lot more of the loitering when it's nicer out, like this spring, summer, when the temperatures increase. That may become a problem where they would maybe have more noise complaints. So we would have to keep an eye on that. And yeah, we feel that, some of the parameters that we've given, they might not be able to do, like the fence. I'm sure that's an expensive improvement, but that's going to need to be a discussion between the applicants and the property owners. We require screening fences for new developments when they go adjacent to residential, so we felt that there was no difference because you're adding a new use here. It's more intense than a bar. It's an actual nightclub that's probably going to have some noise issues. So if they put up possibly some screening fence, that would help buffer some of the noise.
And also, what are the deadlines for them to sort of to adhere to any of the rules that have been set forth so far?
So they've got until this week to comply with the fire marshal checklist, which they had a couple items left over. So the fire marshal will have to make hopefully he can get out there before council, because council meets on Monday, to see if they've gotten their fire alarm tested and the doors fixed. So that's one item. The CUP is another item, which will go to council on Monday. And then there's some items in the conditions that we've given them, like until May 1st to submit a parking plan. I think that site might still be pretty tight for 46 spaces because the parking lot on the north end of the site is only, it's like half grass and it's half gravel. So they would actually maybe need to do some improvements to use that whole area. And then the fencing, obviously that's going to be subject to once the weather warms up, but there's a deadline of June 1st for that one.
Are there any other commissioner questions or comments?
I do have a couple of comments, unless anyone has any more questions. First of all, I feel bad for the applicants because it sounds like they had, my understanding, I read about it in the newspaper, I believe they're new Americans and probably they weren't aware of all the various, rules and regulations, and this is probably going to be more expensive for them than they had anticipated. And so I feel bad for them. And I certainly wish them, success. At the same time, not many people want a nightclub in their residential neighborhood. And so I also feel bad for the people that live around that building because I don't think a screening fence is probably going to do a whole lot to reduce the noise of the bass, pumping so that people are dancing. And I saw in here, one of the conditions is that the nightclub shall operate in conformance with city noise control standards, and no sound from the interior of the nightclub may be heard by a person standing at any property line of 1500 11th Street North. I don't know how you're going to have a nightclub where nobody can hear the music outside the building. That's not our concern. That should be, I think that's a reasonable stipulation. I don't know how they're going to meet it. And that's my concern, is we can put all these conditions on them. Are they conditions that can be met? And if they can't ultimately, even with their best effort, then what happens? In between now and that time, do all of these people have to just live with that thumping bass every night until 1 a.m. or, midnight? So I guess those are my comments. This is a really unfortunate situation all the way around. I would like to give them a chance to try, but I also don't want to give them an unlimited chance to try.
Right, and the only way to meet that condition is to turn your music down.
Exactly.
Well, and, I don't know how low it needs to be. That building is really old. It's probably not insulated very well. There's limited things they can do to it because of fire code. It's not like they can just add more insulation because that stuff is usually, the fence is probably not going to help a ton with the noise, but it is going to provide separation between the parking lot and the residential to the east. So that's really for that. If people are bothered by the noise, they got to call the police. They got to call the non-emergency complaint line so that we know that it's an issue. I live in this neighborhood, so I'm going to try to if I happen to be around, to drive by and see if I can hear it, from the car. They have not had any noise complaints the last 2 weekends. Once they were warned that, hey, we're kind of keeping an eye on you because you're a new business and you're next to residential, they have not had any complaints the last 2 weekends. So that's probably a good sign for them. But again, like I said, once it warms up, it's a different story.
Yes. So I guess that was my comment is, I think there needs to be some endpoint in mind.
And I will say, just for you as planning commissioners to know, if they would have come to me to talk to me about, hey, I found this site, can I do a nightclub here? My job as a city planner would have probably been to discourage them from this location. I would have said, yes, the site has been historically a bar, but this is really more for like a bar tavern location. You're right next to residential. So if you're planning on to have music every weekend, it's probably not going to be a good site for you because you're going to get noise complaints. You're going to, and that's probably not going to work. There are other places in the city. I know there's a vacant bar in South Moorhead that's not next to residential. I don't know what the status, if that's for sale or not. And like the Speakeasy, I think that's for sale. I would have maybe sent them to go check out those locations instead. And that's the whole point of zoning. We don't want to just say no, but we want to help people. And I commiserate with the applicants as well. And it's unfortunate that this was not, all communicated before they got their liquor license.
Having said all that, is there a way to, so they're renting, correct?
Yeah, they signed a 2-year lease.
Okay, that was my next question.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing I would say, nobody wants to see these people have to lay out a pile of money to address some of these issues. And I think there is one potential way in lieu of this fence. It is not going to solve the noise problem from the bar, but it may solve the problem of vehicular traffic that would be the east side. There is a drive aisle from between the east side of the building and the residential neighborhood next door. If that could just be blocked off so there's no vehicular access on the east side of the building, it would be a lot more cost-effective remedy than erecting a fence along the entire property line.
Yeah, I don't think they can block it off just because that's the delivery access in the back, but they could probably sign it so that
there's
no cars are driving back there.
Right. If they can prohibit, vehicular access to when they want vehicular access, like for delivery vans or whatever it is. I don't know how we write that in necessarily, but it would certainly be a less expensive and less intrusive than building a 400-foot long, 7-foot tall fence. Are there any other comments, questions? Are there any public comments? Could you please state your name and address for us?
Barry Olson, 1413 12th Street North. Our house is approximately 50 yards from the building, and it's been nice and peaceful for the last few years without any loud music. But I know if they had a great crowd there in the past, all the streets on 12th Street were plugged with vehicles on both sides. We've got a back alley that comes off in the middle, and we would occasionally have people parking there. But my biggest complaint was that, you're talking about noise above ground. I'm laying in my bed, and when that bass gets going till 1 o'clock in the morning, I can't sleep. And I think that's going to be the issue with most people. It's sound from the bass that goes generates through the ground into another building. And with bass, you've got that long sound wave that if it's the right distance from it, it really gets severe. And at the time, I had to be up at 5 o'clock a lot of weekends because I worked at a nursing home facility in Moorhead, and I was on maintenance, and I was on call all night, and some nights, and if I couldn't get some rest, it was made for a long day the next day, and so I mean I'm really for it being a nightclub. If it's like the ones that I used to go to when I was younger, I know it got pretty loud and went till closing. I mean, so I know across my back alley there's a house. They've got 3 children. One of them is less than a year old. I think the other one is about 2 years old, and the other one, the oldest one, is probably about 4. So I'm sure that sound is penetrating their home also, along with all of the, the trailers right in the backyard of that facility. So I mean, a fence isn't going to help with that.
Sure.
That noise. Plus, all the extra people, like you said, the parking for 300 people is, we only get about 100 people in our church, and we've got 56 parking spots. And yeah, that is good for there, but 42 for 300, or I think that's what you said, or
Yeah,
48, or...
The 300 maximum occupancy is based on fire and building code, so it doesn't mean they're going to have 300 people. The parking is based on the square footage of the footprint.
But you get 300 people, 2 people to a vehicle, that's 150 vehicles. And we know that that's going to be in the streets and, just causing issues. We've got a right, if we have company, for a couple, 3 vehicles out there. But if they've got to park a block away or more to come and visit us, they probably won't. So I mean, it causes issues for all of us. But the noise is my biggest concern.
Can I ask, the last couple weekends when they haven't had any noise complaints, have you noticed the base?
I didn't even know they were open. I'm in bed at 10:30. Mm-hmm. If I fall asleep, it may not bother me, and I think the sound doesn't travel as well in frozen ground as it does in
that's a good point.
Warm ground. Mm-hmm. It's got more ability to. Because like I said, I wasn't even aware that they were open because, at 70, I don't party too much.
Okay. Was there any other questions for Mr. Olson?
But
thank you.
I definitely follow a no pass.
Thank you. I do have one other question, Robin. So if this were proposed as a nightclub, would it be under a conditional use permit scenario? Is it regarded the same as a tavern, bar?
It's regarded the same if it's over 2,000 square feet. So if it was under 2,000 square feet, it actually wouldn't require a conditional use permit. It would be a provisional use. And then in the provisional use, it has some minimal conditions that they have to abide by. And noise is one of them, but they don't have to have. So if it was a smaller bar, sometimes those can work in neighborhoods because then it's more of a neighborhood bar and it's not a nightclub. But this is a nightclub. This is a 4,000 square foot nightclub.
Right.
So that's where it differs. It's more of the intensity of the use is the issue.
Okay, I understand that. I guess it's not necessarily the size that concerns me. It's the distinction between bar versus nightclub. Does the city regard those differently?
No,
Okay.
it's just based on the size.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Is there any more discussion or a motion for the item?
I'm sorry, I have one more question. If this were a bar and not a nightclub, what would the hours of operation be limited to?
We would probably still recommend the 1 a.m. just because historically it's always been a 1 a.m. and, that extra hour doesn't really need, when you're in a neighborhood, 2 a.m., it's getting, 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. for me is very late either way, but we would probably still not recommend a 2 a.m. license in that location.
Thank you.
More discussion? Is there a motion for the item? Then I'll jump at once.
I'm really struggling with that they've already been granted their license and have signed their rental, and I get it that there were mistakes made along the way, but, can we put in enough provisions that would make it and have the follow-up of if you don't meet these provisions, that there's recourses, because that's obviously out of our hands.
Yeah, so conditional use permits are a little funny. It's actually, you think you can say, deny or approve, but they're actually permitted uses with conditions. So you put conditions on that you hope that they can meet, and if they don't, then if they can't meet them, then yeah, you can revoke the permit. I was wondering, because we haven't ever had to do that in my time here, and I asked Christy, she was the city planner before me, and she didn't believe that they had done that before, so that's why I did confer with the city attorneys, and we're going to put language specifically in the council resolution that we've never done before. We're going to start updating those, like, if you do not meet the conditions, this can be revoked. You will be notified with 10 days notice for your hearing where it can be discussed and conditions can be maybe modified. It's going to be spelled out. And I actually, when we went out to do the inspection, I did, try to explain that to the applicants that, you'll most likely get your conditional use permit that you need to operate in this location, but you're going to have some conditions that may be hard for you to operate. But if you can't meet them, you won't be able to stay in this location. So they've been made aware. It is hard because this should have all, hopefully happened differently. But it's a balance. You want to help new businesses, but you also want to protect the existing neighborhood. So it's just not a great location. And basically the city built up around this bar because the bar's been there for so long, and it used to be in the county, and it wasn't part of the city until the late 80s. So that location, we as a city probably would have never zoned that location if we knew residential was going to be next to it. That's how it was attached to the city in that location. So you they were grandfathered in for zoning purposes for a long time until like 5 years ago, and they haven't existed. So that's the point of these non-conforming, statutes. These are types of uses. There are some uses that you just want to go away, like go away. It's not an appropriate location here any longer. Not saying that it can't work, but this is something we're probably going to have to keep an eye on to make sure we're treating both the applicants and the residential neighborhood fairly.
Okay, given all of that, only because you're going to add language to the council resolution. So what we're doing is, correct me if I'm wrong, we're recommending approval to the city council. The city council will actually do the approval or not approval, right? So we're just making a recommendation. Given that you're going to add that language about the conditions under which the conditional use permit could be revoked, I will move to recommend approval of the conditional use permit to operate a 4,220 square foot nightclub adjacent to a residential use in community commercial and related findings of fact to city council contingent upon the list that's in the packet.
I'll second.
Right. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. break? No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right, next. Request of Scott Moen on behalf of American Legion Post 21 for a conditional use permit for an existing dynamic display sign within 150 feet of an area zoned for residential use at 303 30th Street South. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion to open.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
All right. City Planner Houston, could you please provide the commission an overview of the item?
Thank you again, Chair Beam and Commissioners. The request is for a conditional use permit for an existing dynamic display sign within 150 feet of an area zone for residential use at 330 30th Street South. As you can see on the monitor, the Legion is here, and there's residential to the north and also to the east. The existing sign pole is about right here. The applicant applied for a sign permit last May and was informed of 3 options for the type of electronic messaging sign that they wanted to install. I advised them, or I should say we advised them, that they could locate the proposed sign on their building with no special permits. They could move the existing pole outside of the 150-foot residential buffer, or locate the sign on the existing pole in the existing location as long as the messaging on the sign did not change more than once per hour to protect the adjacent neighborhood uses from the typical commercial sign messaging. The applicant chose the 3rd option. A sign permit was issued in August, and as soon as the sign was installed, the programming did not meet the condition of approval for their selected location. The applicant was notified of the issue and stated they wanted to keep the sign as is. They were advised that they could apply for a conditional use permit, but that staff would be still recommending the original condition of approval. The applicant requested, there's a copy of their letter in the packet. They were requesting that they operate the sign between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. and after 6 p.m. the board could go to 1 message per hour, or it could be shut off at night. We received 1 public comment from a resident of the condos across 30th Street North who stated the sign could be seen from their dining room window and they have no objections to the conditional use permit. Based on the location adjacent to residential uses and on the CUP criteria, the following conditions were developed to address the general welfare, health, and safety of the neighborhood. So staff is recommending approval of the sign as long as it meets all sign code regulations. Sign must be located entirely on the private property, including any overhang. Owners shall ensure sign display does not change more often than once per hour, which was the original sign permit condition, and that the sign does not create a visual nuisance by having a rapid, rotating, revolving, scrolling, flashing, blinking, strobing, etc. lighted display, as this type of signage is not appropriate in residential areas. And then owner to receive all other required federal, state, and local permits. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Are there any commission questions or comments?
I would like to hear from the applicant before I have any questions or comments, if no one else has anything else before that.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's hear from the applicant. Your name and address, please.
Evening. Scott Moen.
Scott Moen. Okay.
I'm the manager of the Moorhead Legion. You want the address of the Legion?
It's fine. Let's hear what you got.
Well, we all understand, and who's here with me is past Commander Gary Schultz, who's a retired fire chief, and I do believe sat on this commission. Dennis Beckerlig, our gaming manager, our current commander, Paul Lehman, Jerry Allen, a member, and Tim Haugen, our adjutant, is also here. We're well aware of what the conditional use permits, or what you guys are asking. We're here to try to come to an agreement. which would both benefit you guys with the ordinance and also justify us to use the sign up to a certain time that would benefit the Legion too. I don't know if a lot of you have been over to the Legion lately.
I live right, I go by that sign 6 times a day at least.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what we're here to do is to come to an agreement where the south side of the sign faces all businesses. The north side does face residential. The closest residential is the Pine View Cottages, I do believe. There are excellent neighbors. They hold their annual meetings and other meetings over at the club. They treat us very well. We treat them very well. I've had a couple of them come to my office and express, what's the problem with the sign, and I've told them it's the part of the ordinance, and we've just got to come to an agreement, hopefully. And they were like, okay, well, it doesn't bother us. One of them that lives closest to the sign actually enjoys it because he doesn't have to look at his clock, and he can tell what time it is and what the temperature is outside and see the American flag waving.
So can I ask, what is the agreement that we want to come to? Because the ordinance is the ordinance. So I guess
Right.
I don't understand what agreement we're asking for.
Right, and there was an agreement, I do believe, with Corsmo.
That was a different situation, and I was here
Okay.
then, and we can talk about it.
Right.
But yes. Mm-hmm.
So what we're trying to do is do something similar to that,
Mm-hmm.
where we can still utilize our sign effectively,
Mm-hmm.
because we feel that one message per hour doesn't justify spending that much money on a sign and not being able to utilize it effectively.
At what point did you know the ordinance said you could have one change of the sign for per hour?
Well, and this is people have came back to us and said, well, the sign company should have told you this.
Mm-hmm.
So were we aware of it? I don't recall. I don't think we were. But I'm not positive on that.
But at what point did you become aware?
After this, well, when we got the permit, which the sign had been paid for. I don't know if it was installed yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we started being aware of the certain stipulations.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started talking and wondering what we can do to justify or rectify the situation.
Okay. And so you've known for a while that the sign is not supposed to be able to change. Have you ever been in compliance with the ordinance?
As of today, no, we have not.
Okay, so this is, I guess, this is where I'm going with this is, it seems like you just don't like the rule and you haven't ever followed it because you don't like it. Is that
That's not
okay?
not
So
the
explain
case.
to me the situation then.
Well, the situation is we would like to come to an agreement where it benefits the club and we can still abide by the ordinance.
But
I have
you
a
haven't.
conditional use permit.
Okay, but you haven't abided by the ordinance up till now. This is where I would be more inclined to be sympathetic to your point of view if you had been in compliance and you wanted to change it, but it seems like you've known this whole time. I went past there, as I do many times a day. It was 5 seconds that it changed, and it was moving during those 5 seconds. So it's not like even close to the ordinance is what you're at right now. Is that accurate or inaccurate?
Every 5 seconds.
Every 5 seconds, it's changing.
To be honest with you, I could not answer that question because I do not control the sign. I'm the manager there, but Dennis Beckerleg and his wife, they program the sign, and they put the messages up there. So do I go on my laptop computer and do anything with the sign, the programming? No, I don't.
Okay. So, but I'm just saying, like, we're not disagreeing that it changes every 5 seconds.
No,
Okay.
I'm not.
Okay. So this is the issue that I have here, is that there hasn't apparently been any attempt to be in compliance up till now, and there's no agreement to be made. You want us to give you an exception to the ordinance. We can either do that or not, but we're not coming to an agreement. You're saying, I don't like the rule, we don't want to follow it. We've never followed it, we don't want to follow it at all. That's okay, that's a reasonable position to take if that's your position, but that is the position that you're taking, in my opinion.
I'd say, in addition to that too, there was already an agreement. 3 choices were given on this, and the one you have selected or had selected in the past was based on once per hour of change. To keep it on that pole and to have it change once an hour, that was the agreement that was already reached. So when you do say we're here to reach an agreement has already been reached. It seems like you're going back to the well. So I'm just curious as to, like, I mean, is this generating money? Is this, like, I'm not sure why it needs to be spinning up at every 5 seconds or thereabouts. Even if it's every 10 seconds, it's nowhere near what was agreed to.
If I could have Gary Schultz come up and speak a little bit more intently on that, but
Sure.
And the sign doesn't only just advertise for the Legion. It does have messages on there about school. Be careful, the buses are out, and different other public service messages as well.
But then it changes every 5 seconds so that drivers are distracted while the kids are trying to get on the bus. I mean, that's the other way to look at it.
I see your point.
Gary Schultz, 818 19th Street, North Moorhead. And covered a lot of stuff that I was going to talk about, but yeah, we got the permit on August 8th of 2022. Up till that point, I had been a commander for 3 years. And I had been watching this, but I was not aware of the 1 hour thing, because I've dealt with those signs, and 1 hour just doesn't work. So what we're looking at is, we're looking at something that'll fill our needs, but also meet the intent of the code. I've got a code background. I've been in code for almost 20 years. So I've got a code background, and there's always an intent. What was the intent? The intent is to protect those people. Okay, the way the sign sits, it faces north. There's only one unit that is affected by it, and that faces north. So they only see the side of the sign or part of the sign. And like you said, they don't care. And I know somebody else could move in that would. Well, we're in a CUP, that could be changed at that time if we get complaints. Let's see. Like I said, we submitted some proposals of having it on during the daylight hours, dawn to dusk, street lights, whatever we can work out that we can get something that'll help us, because we do a lot of advertising. We're probably one of the largest charity organizations in Fargo-Moorhead, or in Moorhead anyway, especially in fact, last month alone, we gave away almost $10,000 to 16 different charities, and we do that every month. Besides that, we work with the Legion Riders, and they just received a award from the city of Moorhead.
Yeah, I'm on that committee too, so
Okay,
just so you know.
and so you know the work that they
Yes.
do, and that's through our building there. We work with the Honor Flight, which is another big money. We do raise money for them. So it isn't just that money coming to us; it's all the organizations that use and that's why we need a little better advertising than the once an hour. And you've been out to see the sign. Have you been to see the sign or the area? Okay. And like I said, in fact, I drove by the other day with my wife, and she says she didn't even see the sign to start with. It was during the day. And like I said, with the area, the first house across the street is the only one that is right on the corner of the house, is like 150 feet. The windows are more than that. So, I mean, we're, I guess the bottom line, we're just looking for some help that we can get something and still meet the intent of the code to protect the people living there. And like I said, if you haven't been out there, I would like to, if nothing else, if we can't arrive at anything, put this on hold, or to hold it over till next meeting and have everybody drive by there, take a look at it, and see, take a look, talk to the people if you want. But like I said, we're just looking for some help to make this a little better, and we're still looking at the intent of the code. Every code that's written, I don't care what it is, there's always an intent. I sat on the Minnesota Fire Chiefs Code Committee and traveled all over the country every year. All 50 states would get together dealing with the Uniform Fire Code. And that's one of the things when a code or a code change would come up. First thing, what's the intent? Well, we're trying to do this. Well, sometimes if California would come up with something that's really good for California, but it doesn't help us. Roofs, clay roofs they put on out there. Well, we don't want clay roofs here. So, I mean, it was things like that. But number one was, what's the intent?
So I think you make a great point. I do have one question for you, though,
Yep.
At least one. Maybe there's going to be more. One of the first things that the manager, I'm so sorry, I've forgotten your name already, said was, well, you made an exception for Corsmo. So now we're going to say you made an exception for Corsmo, and then the next person's going to say, well, you made an exception for Corsmo and the Legion. And now we're going to have to keep making exceptions and exceptions and exceptions.
But that's part of the code. That's the alternatives. Every code, fire code, building code, all of them, is if you want to do something, the building official, whoever, will say, well, we can't let you do this, but if you do this, this, and this, like in the fire code, you can add exits to a building to allow more people in, even though the square footage may not be right. So the codes always have these alternatives or things that will not get around the code, but allow you to do somewhat what you want and still meet the intent of the code. That's the big thing. The intent is for these people not to have flashing lights in their windows. Well, they're not. Most of them are way outside the 150 foot, except for that one. And the sign faces this way, and they're over here, so they really don't see it. So we're just looking at, this is a unique situation where we're not blasting them right at them with a sign, and that we could, on during the day, whatever, do some different things and change the 1 hour to something more reasonable, especially during the day when that light is not bothering anybody. So like I said, my recommendation is if we can't come to agreement or sit down with somebody, is to table this, bring it back next month and get all your panel. When I sat in that chair for a while, and I've sat in their chair in the past. And that's what we did, is we went out, Paul was on with me at that time. We went out and looked at that when we got the packet. So when we're here, you got a picture in your mind, because, this is helps you, but it doesn't really help you that much. So that would be my recommendation, is to get everybody out to look at it and bring it back next month and see if there's something that we could meet in the meantime with the planning department. Anything, just so we can get some help and still meet the intent of the code. Because the codes are never written in black and white.
I have a question to intent. What is the history of why 1 hour was selected? Was that before digital signs? Or was that specifically with digital signs that they only change once per hour?
I have actually no idea, because it's a weird one sentence in the definition of a dynamic display sign that it kind of seemed like it was slipped in there for some reason. I have no idea why they chose an hour. I don't like the language because the whole point, the intent of the code is you can't have this kind of signage within 150 feet of residential uses. But if you don't change it more than once per hour, we don't consider it a dynamic display sign. That's how it's defined. So it's really, I don't really have an answer because it was done before I worked here, but.
Certainly to have a sign like that, I've never seen one that only changed once an hour. Like that's that's a long time to have a digital sign that's just sitting there. That's why I was curious about the 1 hour. It seems,
And the 1 hour might have been chosen because these exceptions would be in like residential areas. So then if it only changes once per hour, you're not getting this, the fast scrolling and the extra motion. So it's still a messaging sign, but it's not like a dynamic messaging sign. It's got a message, but it's not going, where it's distracting you if you're driving down the street when it's flashing and blinking and whatnot. I don't really have a good answer, but it basically changes the definition of the style of sign that they've chosen. So if it doesn't change more than once per hour, it's not defined as a dynamic display sign. And that's how they can get around the 150-foot buffer.
what is the distance if it is a dynamic messaging sign?
They can't have it within 150 feet.
But is there you can have it at 200 feet, or what is the distance?
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
have it.
anything over.
If it's anything over
150,
150, then they can have it. That's why I said one of the options, we started talking about this in May, and we went back and forth with the Legion for like 3 months. And we said, here's an option. Put it on your building. You don't need any extra special permits. Move the pole back 15, 20 feet. There's cost to that. You move it back away from the street, no special permit. Or if you want to put it on that existing sign, because you're within 150 feet, you just can't change the message more than once per hour.
So you guys all knew that before you even put the sign up, that was the 1 hour rule and the 3 options before.
Yeah, the 3 options, the 2 of the options were just cost already. We already paid $36,000 for the sign, and to move the pole would be another, I don't know how many thousand, I don't remember how many $1,000 to move it. And if we put it on the building, we're a half a block off the street. What's the sense of having a reader board, off the street where people aren't? It would do us absolutely no good. So the plan was, okay, we'll accept this, let's try it. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Well, we're finding now that once an hour is just not enough. So we're coming back to a CUP and whatever we agree on or don't agree on, we got a CUP. That can be canceled if you don't like it.
So when you say that once an hour doesn't work, when did you try once an hour?
When they first put it up. I have not been involved with that. I was a week before the permit was issued.
Uh-huh.
I was done as the commander over there, so I kind of walked away. So I'll take part of the blame on this because I understand these codes and probably should have followed it through more.
So does anybody that's here know how long the 1 hour kind of trial, the changing it every once an hour, how long that lasted? Sure, I would love to hear more.
Dennis Berkeleg, gaming manager, 424 33rd Street North in Moorhead. We tried it for a day or two, to be honest, as far as the reader board. Before that, we had a visual board on there where we could put Merry Christmas, and it was there forever.
I like I said, I drive past there 6 times a day at least, so yes.
There. And again, like Gary said, it didn't seem, even after trying it for a day, that people were, oh, you got a new sign? We don't know anything about it. In a sense that they just drove by and saw, I'm going to use Merry Christmas as an example, Merry Christmas on it. Isn't that what it said yesterday or half hour ago? So they weren't getting the word that we have gaming, we have this event going on this Saturday, this breakfast, this free wheel.
Oh, okay, so let me ask you this, and this is for anybody. As I say, I drive past many times a day. How many changes of the sign am I, a driver, supposed to see as I'm driving? Like, how many different messages do you want me to see as I'm driving past?
Right now, we got I think the messages are after about 30 seconds.
They're not. They're
No, just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Granted, we've got movement on it.
Nope, they're changing every 5 seconds. Have a nice day. Here's the time and temperature. Here, I literally went and timed it on my way to pick up my kid at school.
Just lately, you have, ma'am?
Just today. this afternoon?
I beg the difference with you.
Okay, well, I can count to 5.
And it
so
may be a small problem on my part. Maybe we have made a mistake and got the timing off on it. I'm not saying that. Ideally, what we're trying to do is about every 30 seconds, given something different. But again,
Okay, but I'm driving by, right? So how
Yes,
many
ma'am.
times am I, as a driver, supposed to see a new message? I mean, how much time am I, as a driver, supposed to be looking at that sign? Because I should be looking at the road, right? So maybe
could
I'll
be.
glance up and I see one message, but I really shouldn't be looking at it long enough to see it change over a bunch of times.
well, all honesty, you're driving by quicker than 5 seconds, aren't you?
I mean,
How long does it take you to drive by there?
well, I don't drive very quickly because there are lots of kids around. So I am a
Yeah,
careful
but
driver.
driving on normal streets, you're driving at 30 miles an hour, aren't
well,
you?
it depends on if there's
How
a
far do
bus
you travel
there.
in 30 minutes or 30
It
seconds?
depends on if there's a bus there or if there's
right.
pedestrians or if there's a, right?
But
so,
that's the idea of the sign. We're putting it on there at 30 seconds,
but you're
approximately.
not. That's the thing. You're not. It's 5 seconds. If
All
you
right.
were 30 seconds, I would have less of a problem with it, to be honest with you, because it's not constantly changing.
Again,
And-
if that is,
It is.
then we've made a mistake on
You
it there.
did, because I can count to 5.
And we would
I will say-
definitely
I'm sorry.
go on it.
That's fine. I want to say this to all of you. I am not opposed to coming to some kind of an agreement. I know that I sound like I'm very opposed to it. I'm actually not. What upsets me is the fact that you guys have all known about this for a long time, and you have chosen, as members of the American Legion, to openly defy this law because you don't like it. That is what upsets me.
Ma'am, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
If we'd done by the book
Mhm.
type thing, how would we address the issue of something different? We would still have to come to this group and ask for CUP, right?
Absolutely.
With it there. We apologize that we didn't. But at the same rate, we looked at it, let's try it. We have to have a starting point somewhere. And this is where it is. That's why we're asking for anything. You know, I mean, you say 30 seconds, 1 minute from the hours of sunup to sundown. And then at night, we shut it off completely, or we go to an hour or 2 hours, whatever it might be.
I'm totally fine with that. If you change it once per hour, turn it off at 6 p.m., fine by me. I'm sorry, once per minute. Once per minute, that would be my, like, place to compromise. Change it once a minute, turn it off at 6 o'clock. I don't have a problem with that.
I, as myself, doing the programming, my wife and I do it, so yeah, we would have no problem in doing it, whatever you say, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute and a half, whatever it might be. But again, we need some time to be able to show something so people can read it.
Well, as I
and being
said-
on at 30, at a minute, now you got time to read it. You're driving on down rather than every 5 seconds trying to speed by or stopping right in the middle of the street.
Right, that's a bad idea. So
Right.
we have 3 other commissioners here who get a vote on this too. I don't have a problem with that idea.
I'm just going to add, Nicole, I totally get what you're saying, because I think I'm ready to go crazy here and say, okay, let's decide what we need to do to move forward and how we can resolve this issue. However, given the history of knowing the 1 hour and nothing coming close to that, I guess I do have a concern. So let's say we come up with our new agreement understanding. How do we feel that you would follow that when you didn't follow the old one really at all? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like
Yes, I do understand.
I want to come to a compromise. I feel like we're spinning our wheels here, and this is not, I think we can come to a resolution, or I would like to come to a resolution that allows you to use your sign, because that makes sense. These are modern technologies that do good things out there. I get it that I understand the intent, but you could literally have your pole 1 foot different and we wouldn't have to have this discussion. And I'm right with you. If I had the cost of having to move a giant pole, or I totally get all that. But how do I feel about the fact that you would actually go with the new ordinance? You know,
We'll sign an agreement. We'll do what it has to. I mean,
Okay.
granted, outside of
don't say honey.
doing something in blood, yes, we apologize. Or again, I apologize if it's shorter than a minute. Yes, ma'am, with it there. Again, what can we do and do it? If you say a minute and whatever hours you set at, all we can do is try it, revisit it in a year, 6 months, see if we've done our part, and then you people have done your part, and for the city of Moorhead, and for the residents of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions at all?
I mean, I just had a question in regard to some of it was addressed, like the language. We don't know where the hour came from, how long it's been there. Obviously, these signs and technology are advancing. Is this a common, given that this side of the table's newer to the commission, did not participate in anything last year or when this initially started? I mean, is this a common issue that we're having as these signs are becoming more prevalent? I mean, is this...
From my
the language be
perspective,
changed.
From my perspective, it's not a common issue. It's something that comes up relatively infrequently because the zoning regulations are very clear as to when these digital signs are allowed and when they aren't. The Corsmo situation, I think, was, remind me what, so the Corsmo, because they're on 8th Street, that was part of the issue. Because that really isn't a commercial district, but it is a commercial, you know, there's residential and commercial, but also the sight lines to where the placement of the sign was meant that it would not shine in any residential home, even though it was technically within that 150 feet. That is the only reason why we allowed that conditional use permit, was because you literally couldn't see it from inside someone's house. But I don't remember another digital sign in the last few years.
No, we haven't done it in any while. And I will say the definition was added when that technology probably started, because EMC signs or dynamic display signs, they've been around for a while. And I think that language where it's about the 1 hour was just added to maybe give some latitudes for people that wanted to do it. But I think it causes issues like this one, because the only reason I noticed that the sign wasn't complying with the permit is because I drive by it every morning. And I'm like, you know, it's changing. You know, I actually parked and timed it too, and mine, when it was doing, it was every three seconds. So I think, you know, we are going to be working on our code updates. The sign chapter is going to get updated. I would like to take this definition language out about the 1 hour, because we just don't have staff to be going around the city and checking to see if everybody's abiding by that 1 hour language. I would rather just these types of signs not be allowed in a residential area, just because they're not, you know, they belong in a commercial corridor. But that's for later, for the Planning Commission for later. But yeah, I mean, technology is always changing, and our ordinances haven't been up, they don't get updated every year, even every 5 years. So that's something we'll have to work on.
I'm going to answer.
Please.
Your question about what's happening, why this is happening, what we're seeing a lot of it is in our situation. When we built in the 70s out there, we built because it was commercial around us, and we had no problem. Well, now, where these houses are, that was plotted almost 50 years ago. That was supposed to be 4th Avenue hooking up with Dilworth.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, and then, I don't know if she's new here, maybe she doesn't know that. But so that was planned. And then all of a sudden they said, we're going to put, so now we're sitting there in place, technology changes, and, well, we can't do this because they now have the residential across. And that's where you're starting to see these issues. Like maybe Corsmo or somebody else, and now there's a living space across the hall or across the road that used to be commercial or whatever. And so that's where you're going to start seeing these things as a business that's been there, and all of a sudden now they can't up their technology because of something that was changed in the past. So that's where they're here to see those issues.
Can I ask a question pertaining to your 5-second animation? If we don't use animation as far as an arrow going across, that's movement. Is that a problem as far as, does that count as every 5 seconds or the general content? Because I mean, if we're using animation, maybe we can't use it. Maybe we just got to have a flash that says, bullseye, you hit it, rather than having a 10-second arrow coming across and hitting the target type thing.
Yeah.
So that may be where you and I are off on our time scenario, because the general content that we're trying to do with the ad, we're trying to look at a time span of 30 seconds, but
Okay, well, the timing's not right, because it was changing messages every 5 seconds with animation during the message. So it was like moving constantly, but the message itself was changing every 5 seconds.
So basically, the words,
Everything. The flag,
Merry Christmas was changing.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Easter every 5 seconds with
okay,
the bunny
okay.
hopping and all that stuff. So there's, yes.
Okay,
So,
that's what I was asking for, a clarification, so that I know on our programming.
yes.
Because these signs now, you can do so much, and I hate to say it, I can sit and use it to make the changes on with my smartphone from here, and by the time you get there, it's already made
Yeah.
the changes. So that's what I need, is a clarification on time scenario and what the movement is on it there. Thank you.
Yes.
I don't think we want to get into animation and all the makes, and we don't want to
No,
get into that layer of specificity in
No.
regard to how we're going to
No,
move forward.
but the intent is not to have sort of a distracting sort of mess in the neighborhood. There's your intent right there. How do we achieve that? That's what we're here to agree upon, I guess. And I see what you guys are trying to do, and it's all fine. And I completely respect what you had to say about this idea that, an agreement was made. An agreement was not honored. So even though we are all, it sounds like, willing to entertain this compromise, it does sort of stand that we're all a little, I'm not going to say upset, but just concerned that any agreement established today will not be adhered to. So when you say you're going to sign your name to it, or whatever the case may be, that has already been done once. So, I'm putting my faith in you. I think the rest of us are as well. We would like to come to a resolution. So, are there any other comments? Okay. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
We still haven't done that yet? I'll move to close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, we didn't get a second, did we?
Oh, we need a
Okay.
second, sorry.
Yes, now we're getting late and we're getting a little punchy. Yes.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any more discussion or motion for the item?
Well, let's talk about what the motion, what we all think the motion should be. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at the packet and I'm looking for recommend approval. Oh, so the recommend approval is owner shall ensure sign display does not change more often than once per hour. I'm willing to go once per minute on that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
I have no problem with once per minute. The letter is page 33, if that helps you find where they were. I don't know necessarily if you need to shut the sign off at night completely. I don't know if that's a big concern. But
The only reason I suggest that is because there are people's houses right there, and maybe the person that is there right now doesn't care, but maybe someone does move in later and at night it would be really bright into their house. That would be the only reason I would, because they did suggest it, and if they're open to that.
Is that a dusk kind of thing versus a 6 p.m. seems kind of early to shut it off?
9 o'clock?
Is it that difficult to just say dusk till dawn?
Well, I mean, who programs dusk till dawn? I mean, who decides that?
It's too, 5 o'clock in winter versus 5 o'clock in summer is very different, so.
Would you be content with a specified time every night to shut this down? Can somebody?
9 o'clock? Is 9 o'clock okay?
9 o'clock work? I'd go.
I go to bed real early, so I would want it earlier, but I don't live there, so it's not only on me.
Okay.
I think 9 or 10 o'clock is reasonable. People go to bed at different times, but I think that's a reasonable.
Currently, it's on all night.
I assume. I guess I don't drive there in the middle of the night.
It's
Okay. So I think maybe there's a couple options here. One is shutting it off completely at night. I think the other, I don't know if this is difficult. It's, apparently not, but even if after 9 p.m. it just went to once an hour or something like that. Does, or
Totally
you could keep it
fine.
on 24 hours a day.
I mean,
I don't know how
Yeah.
difficult that is. I don't know if that's impractical.
They're changing it from their smartphone, but I think that maybe we're saying, we're not trying to require you to turn it off if you can keep it reasonable in the evening hours. But that's up to you. If you want to turn it off because you don't want to, it's too difficult to make the changes at that time, or.
Can it be set so that it's from this hour to this hour, it's changing every minute, and then from this hour to this hour, it's changing every hour? That's a setting.
I mean, would you prefer to have it on? I mean, I guess that's just our other question. I mean, are you trying to keep it on at night, or you don't really care? You're willing to turn it off? I don't know what.
So you'd prefer?
So, so you want it on all night?
No.
Okay, well, then
10 o'clock? 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., 10 p.m.? Once a minute change?
Okay, I'm kind of on the 7 a.m. to me is late because I'm an early morning person. So I would start it before 7 a.m. If it were up to me, I'd vote for
6 to
earlier.
10.
6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Change it once a minute, max. We all good with that?
All right. Robin, did you catch that? Okay. All right. Can
We have one
somebody
he-
make a motion out of that? Oh, please.
Okay, so
So I call. How long
Yeah.
okay, there's no confusion.
We all,
Number one.
I'm with
But also, the simplest thing is just don't put animation on it. Change it once a minute, minimize your animation. Even if you have to put in animation, make it little, make it short. That's the easiest thing.
we can't write this specifically enough to cover all these issues. So we know what the intent is not to bother the neighbors. And we are sort of coming to this compromise because, yeah, you've asked. And of course, you're good citizens. So it's like, yeah, there's a compromise at hand here. But you do understand the intent. Don't pester the neighbors. And so, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move to recommend approval of the suggested action that's in the packet, which is lengthy, and I'm not going to read it all the way, except for the part that says does not change more often than once per hour. We're going to change it to does not change more often than once per minute. And then we're also going to create a condition that the sign can only be turned on from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Get a second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. All right.
So I hope that,
City Planner Houston, are there any other business items for the commission?
Yes, we have a few additional business items, Chair. I would like to take item,
6A?
forget what, 6D out of order first, since
Sure.
Sam's here and he wants to leave, so.
So sorry, Sam.
We'll take his first since he's here. So item 6D is a request of Sam Scaff on behalf of Scaff Apartments for a 2-year extension of a conditional use permit that the Planning Commission previously acted on last year.
Yes.
And it's to exceed height limits in MU3 at 2011 11th Street South, and that's behind the Holiday Retail Center where Starbucks and Qdoba and those types, there's a lot back there that we gave them a conditional use permit to do a multifamily building. The applicant has noted project delays due to rising interest rates and would like the 2-year extension.
Is there any discussion or motion for the item?
I'll move that we extend was it a conditional use permit? Conditional use permit for 2 years?
Yes.
Okay, I make that motion.
Get a
second.
All in favor?
Yes.
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 Sorry about that.
All right, thanks, Sam. So now I'll go back to the regular order here. So we're skipping 6A. We'll do the election at the next meeting. Item 6B is the 2022 annual report. Each year, the Planning Commission submits a report of its work for the preceding year to the City Council. The report is on page 43 of your packet. Certainly, please let me know if you have any questions. I just need a motion to recommend approval of the report and to forward to City Council.
Okay, is there any discussion or a motion for the item?
Just thank you, as always, for compiling the report, and I move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, then the final item is item 6C. It's a request of Epic Holdings 2 LLC for a 1-year extension of their conditional use permit for development in the flood fringe and floodway for 1 4th Street South, which is the Bolig Square mixed-use building. We've been working on this project for a little while. They were waiting on us to finalize the Center Avenue plans, and now they're working with the railroad. So if anyone knows what that's like, sometimes that can take some time. So we're just recommending approval of a 1-year conditional use extension to April 11th with the original terms and conditions of approval.
Okay. Is there any discussion or motion for the item?
I'll move to recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, are we ready for a motion to adjourn? Oh, no, we have we have to ask for reports, sorry. We have to ask for reports. I was going to move to adjourn, but we have item 7.
7, yes. Let's see. And reports and information? None?
Because we're tired now.
Seeing that there's no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
I will move to adjourn.
Second.
We're done.
We're done.
All right, sorry, you guys. I get a little in the weeds on some of these things.